Everybody's in here. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So quickly, just thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here with us today. This is the first of 3 sessions of the Heartland Federal Partners Grant Writing Virtual Workshop Series. We do this every year here in Region 7. If this is your first time, thank you for being here with us. If this is not your first time, also thank you for being here with us. I'm Jennifer Clancy. I'm the KSU TAB Regional Director for EPA Region 7, and I'll be guiding us through this workshop today. And we are really thrilled to have all of you here with us. And we've got what I think is a pretty exciting lineup for all of you this afternoon. Dana, can you go ahead and switch, please? Oh, switch to, go to slide 3. There we go. I have a few quick technical points to go over just before we get started. If you have any technical difficulties at all with your connection during this event, please call the phone number on the screen, 785-200-7005. or email chsr@ksu.edu, and someone will do their best to assist you. We are recording this workshop today and all the other sessions of this event. The recording and all of the presentation slides for this and the subsequent events after they happen, they will be available on the KSU TAB website where you registered for this event within the next few days. And Dana has shared that link in the chat box for you all. Next, please. Okay, a few, again, real quick reminders on Zoom just to make sure everybody has a really pleasant viewing and listening experience today. So all participants should be muted automatically, but please just double check and make sure that your microphone remains muted throughout the workshop today. If you are using your phone for audio, please make sure that your computer audio is also muted in addition to your phone audio. So this just reduces any, kind of static or feedback that might come through as a result of one or the other being unmuted. Also, please make sure that your video remains off throughout this event today. And to make sure that we're able to verify your attendance, please change your participant name to match the name that you used for registration. And so you can do this by clicking on the participants icon in the Zoom toolbar. When the list of participants comes up, please find yourself and then click on the More button and select rename. At that point, a new box is going to appear and it'll ask you to enter a new screen name. So just whatever name you use to register, please make sure that that's the name that is showing up here in Zoom so that we can make sure that you get credit for being here with us today. We really would like this to be as interactive as possible, so we do encourage you to ask questions throughout the event today. There will be dedicated time at the end for questions and answers, but just kind of as we're going through the presentations, please feel free to ask questions, and we'll do that by using the chat feature that is located in the Zoom toolbar. And just so that we can kind of get quickly acquainted with one another and kind of who all's here today, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your name and your organization. And then if there's any other little tidbit about yourself that you feel like you'd like to share with the group, please go ahead and do that. And while we're doing that, we'll kind of keep going on ahead with the rest of the presentations. So Dana, next, please. Okay, so here's a real quick overview of the workshop today. So we're going to have opening remarks from Amy Basanya, who's the acting director of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs for EPA Region 7. We're absolutely thrilled that she's taking time from her busy schedule to be here with us today. Then Maisha Kennedy from HRSA will share with us the general requirements for successfully writing a federal grant proposal, followed by Dr. Sabina Martin, who will talk about work plan development and the key components of writing a strong federal grant application. Let's see here. I'm looking at the chat. Ana Marie Romero was supposed to be joining us today. Jennifer, has that been confirmed? Do we know? Sorry to pause here. Anyway.
Yes, that is confirmed. She is joining us.
Okay, great. Perfect, thank you. So Anna Marie will be here with us to talk about how do we describe our communities and our community needs through using data. And she's going to give us a quick EJScreen demonstration as well. And then we're going to wrap things up with answering any remaining questions that have come in. And then I've got a super quick evaluation that I'm going to ask y'all to take at the very end. So Dana, can you change the slide, please? Okay, so as I mentioned, to welcome us here today and to share some opening remarks with us, I'd like to pass things over to Amy Basanya, who's the Acting Director of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs with EPA Region 7. So Dana, if you can stop sharing, thanks. You're muted, Amy.
I thought I pushed it. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, super. Thanks for the introduction, and just good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Region 7, and a heartfelt welcome on behalf of all of our federal partners, the Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, and U.S. Department of Agriculture. This topic is really near to my heart. I actually started my career probably over 18 years ago with EPA in the grants program. And it's really important to me personally that we continue to engage our communities and helping support our communities to get through our grants process. And so the folks here have put on just a fantastic agenda for you all. And I know they've been doing this over the past years, and it's just been really wonderful to see the increase efforts that we've all been making in the federal agencies to ensure you all have the information you need to have access to the federal funds that we have available. So that's a little bit background on me. I've been with our Air and Radiation Division for a number of years, and now in this acting role, which covers our environmental justice and our NEPA teams. And so I'm excited to be with you all here today and see who all has joined us. So just for a little background for those who may not be familiar with our region, and I see that there's some folks even from outside of our region who've joined. Our EPA region includes Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska, as well as our 9 federally recognized tribes. I also acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of many indigenous nations, such as the Kanza, the Kaw, the Kickapoo, Osage, Oceti-Sakowin, and here in Kansas City Metro, where I'm located. So welcome to the 2023 annual Heartland Federal Grants Writing Virtual Workshop Series. So I know really having in-person workshops are always a great way to be able to network and get to know people, but it's also great to have this virtual option. We're able to bring in so many people far and wide. Also, a thanks to KSU, Kansas State University's technical assistance to Brownfields. We'll call it K-State TAB. You'll hear us say that often. Thanks so much for hosting this event. So we've had attendees tune in, as I mentioned, from many places outside our state, outside of our regions, large urban areas, and from rural towns as well. I think in the past, we've even had folks from the U.S. Virgin Islands join us. So welcome again, everyone. Since we've been gone virtual, I think we've really seen an increase in the number and quality of federal grant applications at EPA and among our federal partners, which I really do think is a direct result from the applicants having better access to workshops like this. And again, that's really important to me. And because of the amount of feedback that we've gotten over the years, this workshop has now been expanded to 3 days. We started that last year. And honestly, it's just in time. Federal agencies are really working hard to move a number of resources, large amount of resources, unprecedented amount of money that we've seen in the agencies, both through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or sometimes called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or Bill, also the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, we call that. And we've been moving these out to our communities, and especially to those most overburdened and underserved communities. We most often move this money through grant competitions, but we know federal grant writing can really be challenging for many. really due in part to the scope of information that's required and the amount of time that it takes people to put the proposals together. And sometimes it can really mean that you need a unique set of writing skills in order to have that winning package. And so again, this 3-week series is really aimed to address that and to take some of the mystery out of the grant writing process by providing these in-depth sessions. So these sessions are full of guidance and tips from state and federal partners and lessons learned from successful grantees as well. So I really encourage you to take opportunities to talk with others who are on this panel and ask lots of questions so that you can really feel confident in your abilities to write, to submit, and successfully manage federal grants. Environmental justice, I mentioned that's is within our group that I'm managing right now, and it truly is at the forefront of everything we do at EPA. It has been in the forefront of my mind since starting at EPA many years ago, and this administration is really making it a consideration for every funding opportunity we have. It's very important. So this workshop series is a way to expand our commitment to equity by making the grant writing process more intuitive and user-friendly so that all of our communities, regardless of size or economic status, have the opportunity to obtain the funding necessary to support environmental revitalization at the local level. This workshop does that by expanding on President Biden's Justice 40 initiatives, which strive to ensure that at least 40% of all overall benefits of federal investments are going to under-resourced and disenfranchised communities and overburdened by environmental pollution. It's one of EPA's top priorities to take immediate and affirmative steps to improve early and more frequent engagement with pollution-burdened and underserved communities affected by agency rulemaking, permitting, and enforcement decisions and policies. EPA and other federal funding opportunities are available, and we will make sure these opportunities aren't missed by the communities that need them the most. So I encourage you all to listen closely to the people and organizations that have successfully navigated this process and were awarded. People like Peter Phillips from the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and Tammy Johnson from the city of Clinton, Iowa, Nancy Larson from the Pollution Prevention Institute at Kansas State University, and Tanya Brown-Louis from Wichita State University, who was recently awarded the first Region 7 Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center grant, or else we call it our TIC-TACs. So please do apply their lessons learned to your next proposals that you're submitting, and use these resources to empower your organizations and improve your communities. So just before we begin, I want to thank you all and our guest presenters and our state and federal partners who are integral in the planning of this series, which include the Kansas State Technical Assistance to Brownfields, of course, our EPA region folks and staff who are on here, Department of Health and Human Resources, Health Resources and Services Administration, Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. Thank you all, and thank you all for your time. I hope you have a great webinar series. I'm going to pass it back over to our hosts.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here with us. We're all really busy. We know that. So it's meaningful to everyone, for everyone that's here today.
We can't hear you, Jennifer.
Can you not hear me?
We can't hear you.
Got it.
Oh, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. Otherwise, I was like, I don't know what to do because I'm unmuted but okay. So let's move on here. I am gonna now hand things over to Maisha Kennedy, who is a public health analyst with HRSA, and she's gonna talk about the general requirements for successfully writing a federal grant proposal. So Maisha, take it away, please.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everyone. As Jennifer said, my name is Maisha Kennedy. I'm a public health analyst and I work for the Health Resources and Services Administration. Specifically, I work in the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs, also known as IEA. I too serve in Region 7, similar to the EPA's Region 7 that includes Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Iowa, and the 9 federally recognized tribes. Thank you to the EPA for the invitation and allowing us to speak today. My presentation will give a brief overview of HRSA IEA, just so you all are familiar with where I come from and the work that we do, and then I'll get into the federal grant application process. I do want to note I'm pretty informal, so I'll stop at a couple places in my presentation to answer questions based off the section that I've just went through, just to make sure I'm giving you all space to ask the questions while I'm going through the information. All right, so we'll first do just a brief overview for HRSA. So HRSA is one of the 11 or 12 operational divisions within HHS, or the U.S. Department for Health and Human Services. We have a mission to improve health outcomes and tackle health disparities across the nation. At HRSA, we work to improve health outcomes and address health disparities through access to quality services, a skilled health workforce, and innovative high-value programs. We are known as the Access Agency. We help to increase the access to care through the operation of more than 90 different programs. And we're also a grant-making organization, which is why I'm here today. We award grants and cooperative agreements that provide healthcare to people who are geographically isolated, economically, or medically challenged. So these are going to be our program areas. Those 90 different programs fall within these program areas. You also get a copy of my slides. So if you want to click that More Program Areas tab there, it is hyperlinked and it will take you to our site to view all of the resources that we have and the programs that we have. I won't share more than that for this slide, just for your awareness. So HRSA IEA, there are 10 regional offices across the U.S. Again, I work for Region 7. We serve as the principal agency lead on intergovernmental and external affairs, regional operations, and tribal partnerships. We serve as ambassadors, providing outreach and education to increase the reach, impact, and awareness of HRSA programs and resources. As HRSA ambassadors, we can assist by brokering relationships and connecting stakeholders to our HRSA programs and other resources and funding opportunities. I say all that to say we are a resource to you. Please reach out to us. We love to provide technical assistance and serve any way that we can. If you want to be connected to some of our other federal partners, we're a good step through the HHS door. My contact information will also be at the end of the slides. And then this slide, just to show you some of the work that we've done in the last few months. We do a lot of outreach, like I said, in education. We provide technical assistance, and that can also look like doing workshops and summits. We host some webinars on an annual basis as well, just to give you a brief overview. Do I have any questions about HRSA IEA?
I haven't seen anything come in, but
Okay.
to those listening, if you've got any questions for Maisha about HRSA, go ahead and drop them in the chat box, and we'll get to them at some point throughout the.
Sounds good.
Today.
I usually don't have any questions about HRSA, but it's nice to ask. Most people are like, no, I don't have any questions. So we'll move on. We'll go into the federal grant application process. I do want to note that there are many different kinds of grants. You can have grants from cities, states, community organizations, and foundations. I specifically today am going to be speaking on the federal grant application process. But I just did want to make you aware that there are other grants available. And if you're wanting to partner with a local agency, we can help you make that connection as well. So the first step in the grant application process is registration. There are two places that you will need to register. One place being grants.gov, and then the second one being SAM.gov, or the System for Award Management. Grants.gov is a site that is operated by HHS, and it houses information on over 1,000 different federal grant programs. Before, again, applying for grants on grants.gov, you will need to create an account and register with SAM. SAM is a government-wide registry for organizations doing business with the federal government. These two systems, grants and SAM, they share information, and together they provide access to everything needed to identify federal grant opportunities, which can be found on the grants.gov site, and to complete the online application process. I do want to note that both systems can be accessed through a single user account set up in login.gov. You will automatically be prompted to create a login.gov account if you don't have one when you register for SAM. So you don't need to worry about doing something on the side with login.gov. So in SAM, you are registering SAM to receive what is called a unique entity identifier number. And you'll need that number for the rest of the grants process when you register with grants.gov, as well as when you're filling out your grant application process. Many people write this number down wrong, or they forget it. and you will need it for the rest of the process. So just keep that in mind. I'll throw some tips and tricks in as I go through the rest of the slides. So beginning with SAM, you register, go to sam.gov, that is the URL, to obtain your UEI, that unique entity identifier number. That number is a 12-character alphanumeric identifier assigned to each unique organization. Registration in sam.gov requires providing different assertions, representations, and certifications, and other information. All of that information is so that we as a federal government can verify the existence and the uniqueness of your organization. I will say that sam.gov has many different resources to help you in the registration process, one of those being an entity registration checklist. So if you go to sam.gov, on the main page, there's a big box and it'll have a hyperlink. It's called Entity Registration Checklist. Click that link and that checklist will provide all of the information that you're going to need to register with SAM. The person that is doing this registration process with SAM and with grants.gov, they are designated as the e-business point of contact. Your organization will make a decision on who that person will be. I do want to make a note that it can take about 7 to 10 business days to fully complete the registration process required for most funding opportunities. Just have that timeline in mind. Have the deadline for your grant in mind, and then have the registration process timeline in mind so that we make sure you don't miss the deadline. Federal agencies, unfortunately, are not going to extend the application deadline because you haven't had time to register or your registration hasn't been complete yet. Just to make a little note there. And then the last thing I want to mention, there is no registration fee for registering with sam.gov. It is free, and the same thing for grants.gov. If you are being asked to pay, you're being scammed, and it's not the government. So don't pay for this process. It is free. I say that because I do many different workshops and webinars on this presentation, and some people have told me that they have paid, and I'm like, no, don't do that. So a little disclaimer for everyone in the room. So again, the organization will be designating the e-business point of contact when registering with SAM. That person will create what is called a marketing partner ID number. It's a password that the e-business point of contact creates, and it'll be used when they're registering with grants.gov to log in. Your organization's eBiz is usually the chief financial officer of your organization or another authorizing official. I do understand that not all organizations have the capacity to have more than one person doing the grants process. So your e-business point of contact, they are not the ones submitting your grant. They're the ones delegating the roles for whoever is submitting your grant. But the e-business point of contact and the AOR can be the same person. If your organization doesn't have multiple people to do this work, they can be the same person. Just know that the responsibility for the e-biz and that authorized organization representative are going to be different, okay? And that the AORs will be the ones who are actually doing the work in grants.gov of filling out the application and submitting it on behalf of the organization. Okay. So once the e-business point of contact designates whoever it is who's going to be doing the work on the grant, the AOR can then log into grants.gov and complete a profile. The e-business point of contact will need to log in and approve the AOR registration. Each AOR registrant submits a registration form to grants.gov, and there can be more than one AOR. Once that person, the AOR or the people, have submitted their registration form to grants.gov, the e-business point of contact will receive an email prompting them to log into grants.gov and approve the AOR. The e-business point of contact will need to use that marketing partner ID number that they created in SAM, that password that they created to log in and approve the AOR registration. When registration is approved, the submitting AOR will receive a confirmation email, and then you'll be able to submit grant applications after that. I will say the AOR must update his or her registration annually, and passwords must be updated every 90 days. That's just a disclaimer for your awareness. And then I do want to note that grants.gov does have a call center, and it is actually very helpful. I have used it. I've used it for other stakeholders that I've worked with who've gotten stuck in the registration process with SAM or with grants.gov. They are actual people on the line. They are available 24/7. And they are there to help you, really, and they'll help you figure out whatever's going on with your registration process, or if you have questions about the application. Grants.gov has many different resources available. One of those resources being Workspace. It is an application in Grants.gov that organizations, the grant team can use when applying for federal grants. Workspace is a role-based tool in which the user's assigned, so that the people that the AOR, the e-business point of contact has designated, that AOR, the standard AOR, or the Workspace manager, those are the different kind of roles. They can go into Workspace, work on their different sections of the grant simultaneously without bothering the progress of anybody else. I just shared this as a resource to you. Most organizations don't actually use Workspace, so you don't have to, but just for your awareness to know that it is available to you. And grants.gov does offer a video to help you utilize this tool, learn how to set it up. I've also put a video in my presentation here. I will not play it today because most of the time it does not work for me. So I will save that for you all to play. It's about 3 minutes. So if you're wanting to learn how to create a workspace, then you can play that video. Do we have any questions about the registration process?
Yeah, Maisha, nothing about that process, but we did have a question come in about where people can subscribe to the notices about the webinars you talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, so if you are interested in learning about HRSA's webinars, I'm assuming that's the question.
Yes.
About the things that we do, you can write me. We don't have a space where you can put yourself on our own our distribution list, but if you send me a message, I will add you. I'll add your email to our distribution list, and you'll get all the information about what we're doing and the different events that we're up to.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. That is all that we have right now.
Awesome. All right. I will keep going then. So after registration, right, you're now in the actual grant application process, and we'll kind of go through where you can find funding. There are 2 places that I normally present. I work for HRSA specifically, so HRSA has its own site, but so do other federal agencies. You can find federal funding opportunities on their website, or you can use grants.gov, that HHS full site. If you type in grants.gov, it'll take you to a page that looks exactly like this. We're going to click on the Search Grants tab that is highlighted there with the white circle. We click on that tab, it's going to take us to a page that looks like this. Again, I have it filtered because I work for HRSA, but if you are looking for grants from the CDC or from the EPA or from SAMHSA, you can put the little HRSA acronym, CDC acronym in the keyword box, and it'll pull up the grants that are available. Grants.gov is going to show you the opportunities that are currently posted, and then it's also going to show you opportunities that are forecasted. And what that means is the grant hasn't posted yet, but they give you a projected date of when it will be posted, and you can still click on the opportunity number and learn some information about the grant, the eligibility requirements, the amount of funding that they are estimating will be awarded for those forecasted opportunities. But for today, I'm going to take you through that first opportunity number, the Healthy Start Initiative Enhanced. We're going to click on that opportunity number, and it'll take us to a page that looks like this. This page will be similar. This is a HRSA specific grant, but it's going to be, it'll look similar if you were applying for some other federal agency. It's going to offer you a synopsis of the grant. If you scroll down, I can't do that. My little picture here doesn't show that, but if you scroll down, it will show you the eligibility requirements for the grant. It's going to show you how much money is being offered, the award ceiling, how many awards are being offered, as well as that deadline for the grant. Please have the deadline in mind when you're going through this process. I don't want you all to do all this work and miss the deadline for the application. So know that these are some things that you should know before you even begin the process of applying for the application. Just have that deadline in mind. Create a timeline. That is my suggestion, working backwards with the deadline in mind, and then creating your timeline moving backwards from that. But on this page, we're going to click on the package tab here, and it'll take us to a page that looks like this. If you had already read your notice of funding opportunity, you could have gone ahead and clicked apply, but I highly recommend for anybody who is applying for federal funding, you want to make sure what it is that you're getting involved with. So I always suggest that you preview the grant, and I'll show you what that page looks like. I do also want to note that you can subscribe to grants.gov, and I have some information at the end of my presentation on how to do that and what that looks like. But if you are interested in this funding opportunity, you could subscribe, get updates, say it wasn't posted yet, it was a forecasted opportunity. You could subscribe and get updates on, hey, it's posted, or other awards that are similar to this opportunity. So if we click on that preview tab, it'll take us to a page that looks like this. We will click download instructions, but before we do that, I'll just explain what you're seeing here. In the mandatory forms section of this page, those are going to be all of the forms that you need to submit with your grant application. I highly recommend that you download them, read them through, just so you have an understanding and an awareness of what you are being asked to provide in your grant application. Create a checklist to make sure that you do include all the mandatory forms. If you don't, your grant application will be considered incomplete, and you will more than likely be scored down for your grant application. And we'll go through what that review criteria and the scoring is like. But this page will also provide you a point of contact for the grant. So if you have any questions, like clarifications about what you're reading in your instructions, what I'm going to call the notice of funding opportunity, there's also a point of contact for you to reach out to. So we've clicked on the page, we clicked on download instructions, and that will take us to the notice of funding opportunity. Do I have any questions about where to find funding? Okay, I'm hearing none.
I'm not seeing anything. Sorry, I couldn't get to my mute button.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, and if you've got questions about what Maisha just talked about, just keep dropping it in the chat and we'll get to it.
All right, so we're going to move on to the notice of funding opportunity itself. I will make a disclaimer here. For the purpose of my presentation, am going to use the words NOFO because that is what we call them with HRSA. But the notice of funding opportunity has many different names. If you're working with other federal agencies, this might be a funding opportunity announcement. It might be a program announcement. It might be called a request for application, a parent announcement, a solicitation. There are many other terms. Just know that when I mention NOFO, I'm also talking about all of those other things, but I specifically work for HRSA, so you're going to hear the example for the agency that I work for. But all federal agencies have a form of notice of funding opportunity. So what is the NOFO? It is a formal announcement of the availability of federal funding through a financial assistance program. So all those 90 different programs that I showed you before, the different bureaus and offices within HRSA, they release funding for different programs that you all can apply for to enact different things for your organization. The notice of funding opportunity is going to provide the information on the award, including how many awards will be given, the amount. It'll also include who is eligible to apply, your evaluation criteria for a selection of an awardee. What that means is how your application will be scored, what they're looking for you to include in your notice of funding opportunity, in your grant application, excuse me. And then it'll also include how to submit your application. I highly, very highly recommend that before you submit your grant application, before you even begin the process of writing your application, you have read this, highlighted it, marked it, and you understand everything that's being asked in the NOFO. We give it to you as a guide on what we're looking for to include in your application. So make sure that you have read it all the way through. So these are the different sections of the NOFO. If it's called something else, you're still going to have these different sections. And we'll go through what those different sections include. Not all of them, but the ones that are really, really important here. So you have an executive summary. That summary is going to provide background information on the NOFO you're applying for or the program that you're applying for. It's going to include the purpose of the grant, the funding opportunity number, which you'll need for your grant application, application due date, the estimated number of awards, the project period. So say your grant is not 1 year, it's 5 years. It'll say that. In your NOFO, it'll have the start date for the project, who is eligible for it, and then a link to what we at HRSA call the SF 424 guide. Other agencies have a companion guide for grant applications as well. These guides are going to be what you use to kind of help you walk through HRSA's FSF 424 has information on how to register with SAM, how to register with grants, and then how to write the different sections of your grant application as well. So highly recommend that you download that as well. But that's the executive summary. And then we'll move on to the submission section. It's going to outline, again, the due date for the application submission. Some grants may have 2 phases of submission if your grant does require you to submit in more than one place. So say you're submitting in grants.gov, but you're also being asked to submit somewhere else. It'll have this information laid out for you here in the submission section. At HRSA, we have some grants that are required you submit them in grants.gov, but then you also have to submit them within the electronic handbook system. So I encourage you to read your NOFO to make sure you know where you're submitting your grant application. It'll lay it out for you. The submission section is also going to include any follow-up action required after becoming a recipient of the grant. And I will note, if you fail to comply with all of the requirements, including the federal registration stated in the NOFO, your application again will be deemed non-responsive and it will not be considered for funding. So read it all the way through, make sure you're including all of the sections. Many agencies will hold a pre-application technical assistance webinar. These are often linked in your notice of funding opportunity. The webinar will provide an overview of pertinent information on the NOFO. It's just an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you've read through it and you're like, I don't really understand what they're asking here, that technical assistance webinar will be an opportunity for you to gain any clarifications for the different sections of the NOFO. That agency contact that's listed in your NOFO will also be available to you after the webinar to ask any follow-up questions as well. So within this section is also going to be your narrative section. It sets the framework for your application. It includes the instructions on what should be included in your grant application. For this section of your application, organization, precision, and clarity are very important. If you are unclear about any of the directions, again, follow up with that agency contact. But your narrative section is going to include an introduction, a needs assessment, methodology, a work plan, resolution of challenges, evaluation and technical support capacity, and then some different organizational information and a budget narrative. What you see circled, highlighted in red, there's a little red circle over review criteria. That review criteria is going to be how your grant application is scored. So we give you right off the bat what your objective review committee, those are the people who are going to be looking over your grant. We provide you what it is that they're looking for and what the score is if you do exactly what they're asking you to do in the NOFO. So for the review criteria, every agency has different procedures for assessing the technical merit of applications and they provide those through the objective review. Your reviewers will evaluate and score your application based upon that review criteria that I showed you in the previous slide. The entire proposal will be considered during the objective review process. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what that looks like in a couple of slides, I believe. So again, just so I can prove that I'm not a liar, the agency contact is provided in your NOFO there, as well as the award notice and more contact information if you're interested in contacting us about what is included in the NOFO. We do understand that they are difficult to understand. There's a lot of language in there that is hard to read. We at HRSA are working on simplifying the language that we use in NOFOs and making it more clear for organizations so that it is not as confusing to go through the NOFO, but if you need some help, there's help available. Okay, so you have submitted your application and it is now in the objective review process. What does that mean? So I'm going to put my HRSA hat on and I'll go through what our process is. Just know that every federal agency has a similar process if it is not exactly the same. We have different departments and different, bureaus. So I'm going to speak specifically about HRSA's process here. So our grant application review process is going to be done within the Division of Independent Review within the Office of Federal Assistant Management, or OFAM. Step 1 is each application is independently reviewed by 3 qualified reviewers. Peer reviewers are responsible for application evaluation against that merit criteria, that box that I showed you, and how your grant's going to be reviewed and scored. they are looking at that box, looking at your application and seeing how it measures up. Step 2, the ORC, the Objective Review Committee, they are going to meet virtually at a designated time to discuss and create a summary statement by consensus. So everybody needs to agree on like this grant is really good, or here are the areas that you need to improve in the grant application process. Grants, your application overall is going to be scored either outstanding, very good, satisfactory, marginal, or poor. And outstanding would be that you've included all the elements in the NOFO. It is well conceived, it's easy to read, it's well supported. Poor, I'll just give you the definition of what we consider that is very few elements are addressed, the documentation required information are deficient or they're omitted, you didn't include them. And then the weaknesses identified will likely have substantial effect on the applicant's proposed project. So when they're going through your application process, they've identified more weaknesses than they have strengths. And I will say that we do provide a summary of how well you did in your application. We'll give you that feedback. So if you want to apply for another opportunity in the future, you can incorporate the feedback that the ORC committee has given to you and incorporate it in the future. Okay, so that's HRSA's review process. And then this is the full process that I've just gone through. You've submitted your application, it's being reviewed. Once it's reviewed, it's selected or it's not, and we will let you know what your award determination is. That's HRSA's process. So taking my HRSA hat back off, and we'll kind of go through what a companion guide is just very briefly. This is the only slide. The SF 424, like I said again, other agencies have what's called something else. I know the EPA, I think, has what's called a solicitation clause, but they are going to be what you can use as a companion of filling out your grant. Like I stated earlier, it'll include how to register for SAM, the information that you need for grants.gov, and then it'll also include different guides on how to fill out each section of the notice of funding opportunity. So I would print both of them off, have them side by side as you're going through the application. And then the guides can also be found on the grants.gov website. They have the forms available for you there. So for your awareness, I'm going to take us through just some suggestions and some things that we have seen our ORC committee has pointed out for strong applications. But before I do that, do I have any questions about the notice of funding opportunity section?
Nothing has come in.
Okay.
You're doing an excellent job.
Well, thank you. Okay, so we'll go through the 5 R's. I won't say anything on this slide. The first R, do your research. This is a lot of work. Filling out a grant, it's going to take a lot of time. I don't want you all to do all of this work and then you're not eligible for it, or you do all of this work and your organization doesn't actually have the capacity to fulfill what's being asked in the grant. So I often tell people, don't ask yourself if your organization needs the funding, but rather, can your organization commit to the potential project that's being laid out in the notice of funding opportunity? Make sure you have a really, really good understanding of what's being asked of you for the project period of the grant. And then it's a lot of work to do for one person. Again, I know not all organizations are able to recruit a team, but it is helpful if you have the capacity to do that. There is a lot of work to be done and you can split it up between yourselves. I will say, make sure that when you submit your grant application, your application is in one voice. It kind of throws off the application if we can tell, oh, this person wrote this person wrote that. Split the application up and then put it together, read it, reread it, and kind of edit it to make it sound like one person wrote it. That is some feedback that the Objective Review Committee will give to a lot of organizations. So just have that in mind. If you are a consortium member in a grant, make sure you're having conversations with all organizations and the expectations are known for all parties involved in the consortium, okay? Make sure everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. Group projects are difficult. So just make sure everybody is aware of their roles when recruiting a team. Respond to the guidance. I say that to say, read the NOFO. I've said it multiple times, and I hope that, me repeating it means that it's really, really important. Include everything that we're asking you to include. I will note, avoid using jargon and acronyms. we don't know anything about your organization, so you please write like that. Have your audience in mind, and I think I have a slide that says that specifically, but spell out everything. Make sure you're giving definitions for things. You might know what that means, but that doesn't mean that everybody else does as well. So just have that in mind. There are specific requirements for page numbers. There's specific requirements for font sizes and like the order in which you're submitting your attachments. So just make sure you're responding to the guidance, meaning you've done everything the way that we've asked you to do it. Because if you don't, you will be scored down for that, unfortunately. And then review your application. Oftentimes we write things and it makes sense to us in our brain because we know exactly what it is we're supposed to say, but not everybody else understands what you're saying. So review your application. And I will say, there are some advantages and disadvantages to using a grant writer. The advantages being it's their job. It's their job to do them well. The disadvantage being they don't know your organization very well. Some organizations are able to actually hire grant writers they have them on staff. And the benefit of that is they know the organization. They can outline and write a story about your organization. But grant writers who do not work for you, but you're contracting in, they don't have that advantage of knowing the background of your organization. So that would be the disadvantage. It also costs to hire a grant writer. So that's another disadvantage as well. But those are my tidbits for there. Writing a strong application, I would suggest that you ask yourself these questions before submitting. Often funded proposals, they're going to be the ones that explain problems and what the organization plans on doing to fix them. They have a lot of information, but the proposal flows and it's easy to read and understand. The funded proposals often describe current planned collaborations, and they provide information on staffing needed if you need that. They have clearly defined objectives, and they respond to all of the review criteria that's laid out and the notice of funding opportunity. And they've often been reviewed by several people. Even if you're the only person working on this grant, I highly, highly recommend that you have somebody else read through it just to catch those things that your brain automatically fills in because you know what you're supposed to be writing. Okay. And I'll kind of fly through these because I know Sabina is also going to kind of go through some common mistakes and important tips for you all as well. Start early. I've said that. Have the deadline in mind. You have, for our grants, I know 45 to 90 days to submit your grant application. Taking into account the registration process can take up to 10 days, if not longer. If something is going on and they haven't submitted, they haven't approved your registration process, keep that in mind. So you had 45 days, now you've got 30, so keep that in mind. Start early. It takes a lot of time to write this. You want to make sure that you were able to do it well and you can participate and attend the technical assistance webinars to ask all of your questions. So yeah, have that in mind. At HRSA, we provide past notice of funding opportunities to our stakeholders. So if you know you have a grant in mind, from HRSA specifically, you have a grant in mind, we can work with you, send you a past notice of funding opportunity. From year to year, they do not change very much. You can get your grant application like 85% of the way there. When it's posted, you're already prepared. You can read through the new notice of funding opportunity, make sure each section is lining up, and you're already ready to go to submit, and you make sure you don't miss that deadline. So just a little tip for you. I've already said it. I'm not going to say it again because I believe that it's important. Read the NOPO. And then keep your audience in mind as well. We cannot go outside of your application to Google information or to search your organization if something is not laid out in there. You've got to include everything that you want us to know. We are not subject matter experts of your organization. So you need to write your application in a way you should. I'll say write your application in a way that we become familiar with what it is you're wanting to do in your organization. Okay. And then be concise, be brief, be clear. It's really difficult. If your application is really difficult to read, it's going to be difficult to understand what it is you're doing, and you'll be scored poorly or down. I won't say poorly. You'll be scored down for lack of conciseness. So, and be organized and logical. There are some budget narrative justification section in your notice of funding opportunity, what you need to actually include in your grant application. Have that in mind. You will need to provide that evidence of fiscal stability and sound fiscal management. So just be aware that that is a part of the application. Those mandatory forms that I showed you, those are going to be the attachments that you use in your application. If your application does not ask you to submit something, to submit an application, then an attachment, don't do it. Don't include in that attachment we're not asking for, because most of the time it'll mess you up. You've submitted it in the wrong order and you'll be scored differently because you've done that. So if we're not asking for it, don't be fancier than what we're asking you to be. Include what we've laid out for you to include, and make sure that it is in the proper order. Okay, we cannot fix the order once your application is submitted. We won't do that. So make sure it's in the right order. All right, print it, proofread it, and then submit it on time. We highly suggest that you submit it 2 to 3 days before the deadline, just to make sure you're like, hey, you did it. You can breathe, and just wait on us to hopefully approve your application. Those are the lists of common mistakes. I've kind of already gone through most of them, so I won't spend any time on them here. We do offer a webpage with resources and links to support you through this process. The link is there on the screen, www.hrsa.gov/grant/apply. Other federal agencies also have grant application resources for you. I know the EPA has a really great website on how to go through the grants application process. So know those resources are available to you. We also have a link on how to become a HRSA reviewer, a grant reviewer. Being a grant reviewer is a really great way to understand the grant process and what reviewers are looking for. It's kind of like a cheat, but it's legal. So you can become a HRSA grant reviewer. That information on how to do that is available on this webpage as well. You are financially compensated for being a grant reviewer. You do not have to have any previous experience of reviewing grants before, but we are looking for grant reviewers in specific expert areas. So say like we have a maternal child health grant that we're reviewing and you do maternal child health work, you could be a reviewer on our grant programs from our NCHB Bureau. So just have that in mind. I will say the stipends that we're providing you, they're like $300. So it is not if you're wanting to do it as a full career, do not select HRSA as $300 is not very much to live off of. So just keep that in mind. It is not supplemental funding. So we also provide the HRSA Training and Technical Assistance Hub. This hub is a centralized location to house our different technical assistance resources from our different bureaus and offices. Each bureau and office funds training and technical assistance so grantees can maximize their impact. We love data in our grant applications, and I'm going to say that our other federal partners also really like data in their federal grants. So this is a resource for you. Our HRSA data warehouse is also a resource for you. If we're asking for different geographic information or maps, you can find that information on our website or the data warehouse. And then finally, manage your subscription with grants.gov. Highly recommend. If you're interested in any federal grants, you should subscribe to grants.gov. You can subscribe as an individual or as an organization, and manage your subscription based on whatever it is that you're looking for. And you will get updates on different topics or different program opportunities. So that, I believe, those are the last slide. This is my contact information. If you have any questions that you did not want to ask in front of the group or you did not want to put in the chat, feel free to give me a call or email me. My information is there. Do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, so this is something I can address though. Someone was asking how to access your slides. And just so everyone here knows, we will be posting all of the presentations, all the slides that have been used during this session on the events page for this event on our website. And Dana will reshare that link in the chat box. So they're not posted now. Yeah, she just shared that. They are not posted now. They will be posted within the next couple of days, along with the video recording of this whole session today.
Okay, awesome.
And I haven't seen anything else. And just, Maisha, so you know, the full comment was, this content and your presentation have been great, Maisha. So thank you.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. Again, if you have any questions, please, I'll be here for the rest of the webinar, and then my information I'll plug in the chat. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Maisha. Okay, it is time for a quick 5-minute break. So we can just kind of get up and move around a little bit. We've got, still some time left here together. So let's get up, move around, take a little break, shake it off, do whatever we need to do, and then come back for the rest of the afternoon's session. So 5 minutes, I'll start a timer. See y'all back in a few minutes. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back in. Hope you had a nice time stretching, walking around your office, whatever it is that you were doing after that last bit of time. I'm going to now hand things off to Sabina Martin, Dr. Sabina Martin, who's a KSU TAB partner, and she is going to share with us some of the key components of writing a very strong federal grant application.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. Yeah, so as Jennifer said, I'm Sabina Martin. A little bit of background. I wrote grants in the past, and I'm reviewing grants too. So a lot of what you will see is a mixture of hints and tips, experiences based on those two things. I work closely with Jennifer here at K-State TAB. I'm the contact for Missouri, Nebraska, and Kansas for TAB. And yeah, I think that will suffice for now. I'm going to share my screen, and then I will turn off my video. See if I can. Well, let's just share this screen, stop my video, and all right, here we go. So there are work plans and then there are work plans, right? I just want to get this out of the way immediately. For the EPA Environmental Justice grants, the Environmental Education grants, and the Healthy Homes Lead-Based Paint grants from HUD, the work plan is basically your proposal narrative. It's your application for the grant. It's your grant proposal. It describes what you want to do and how you will accomplish it and why. For the Brownfields grants, the EPA Brownfields grants, the work plan is not part of the proposal. It comes after you submitted your proposal and after the grant is awarded. So just keep that in mind. And for some reason, I cannot. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So first steps. There are still some people out there who basically hunt for grant money, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, except for when you do that, you want to have your project already in mind. It's not like looking for the pot of gold here and then start thinking, okay, what am I going to do with it? How can I possibly make this work? So it's always better to start out with a great project and then look for the specific grant resources that might be applied to that project, as the other way around. I mean, that usually doesn't work well and it doesn't end well. The other consideration should be, is the grant worth the effort? I mean, every grant writing experience, every grant writing takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. So ask yourself, if an agency asks for, like, say, I don't know, I'm just making this up, right? 10 pages of some grant application and they only give you $10,000, is that worth your time? And then pick the right grant for the job. I mean, always consider, why are you applying? Why is this good for your community? What do you want to achieve? And is this really the right grant for the job, or are there others that are better? And then after you've made that decision to go for a grant, map the critical path and establish your timeline. Because as Misha already said, writing grants takes a lot of time and you don't want to end up rushing it at the end. I know we all procrastinate, and a lot of people say to themselves, well, I work a lot better when I'm under stress. Yeah, maybe yes and maybe no. So in terms of preparing for a grant, I mean, identify your partners. Usually for a grant, you can't and you don't want to go it alone. So get your partners lined up early, schedule already community meetings and public notices, if those public notices are required by the grant that you're looking for. Do have the time, make the time for internal review within your organization. Sometimes you have to go and get grant approval for whatever you submit. And you may want to go externally as well for review. Like we at TAB, we review EPA Brownfields grants. And I mean, I think that's a great service to communities, especially those who have never written a brownfield grant. So something like that can help a lot. As Misha said, register immediately if you haven't done so in grants.gov, sam.gov, get your unique entity identifier. That does take time, take that into consideration. And I just put the last bullet in there for those of you who have not done this in a while. The DUNS number is not required anymore. It was replaced by this unique entity identifier number. So timing and prep is everything, like with everything else, right? Start early. It really is much more work than you think. It takes longer to write a good grant application. It's not just that you're actually writing the wording, the layout. You need to get your resources together. You need to get your statistics together. You need to get your partners together, and on and on and on. One thing that I would say, if at all possible, read successful grant applications from previous grant cycles. So you know what you're getting into, you know how people answered the grant criteria. That's not to say that you should copy that, right? But it gives you a feel for what the agency is looking for and how to respond to the asks in the guidelines. Grant-specific partnerships. I mean, look for good partners that actually enhance your project. I mean, don't just, and again, I'm making this up, like your cousin says, oh, that sounds like a really great application. I really want to be part of that. Yeah, fine. But I mean, what can you offer, right? How can you make this better? How can you help me as the applicant to get the grant? Gather your statistics early. That also takes time because, again, they need to be meaningful. And also sign up for any type of webinars that the granting agency puts on. I put EPA and HUD here, but any federal agency usually has webinars prior to releasing the guidelines, sometimes maybe even after, to kind of give potential applicants an idea as to what they're looking for. Go to workshops. TAB puts on a lot of workshops and webinars for the EPA Brownfields grants. And as I mentioned before, here, look at the successful grant applications. If you go to the K-State TAB website, the website where you registered for this webinar for, we have successful grant applications from previous Brownfields, EPA Brownfields grants out there and on there, and you can look as to what things look like. Usually grant guidelines don't change very much from year to year. They can change, and yes, you do need to read the guidelines, but overall you will get a good picture as to what they're looking for and what you need to provide. Yeah, be kind to your reviewer. Excuse me. A lot of reviewers, I mean, they not only read your application in a day, right? I mean, they read, I don't know, it depends how long the applications are, but maybe a couple, and they do that day in, day out until everything has been said and done. Not that there is only one reviewer for a certain grant, there are multiples, but there are also a lot of grants coming in. So it really helps you, and also the reviewer, of course, but in the end, you, to write your grant application clear and understandable and concise. I mean, don't ramble. Be really concise, have strong mission points, and have a good and compelling story. And that goes to, like, why do I need this grant? Why is it beneficial to my community? Avoid using acronyms and technical organizational jargon. Nobody knows what that means if you have just an acronym there and you don't explain it. And I've seen that over and over again. This acronym might be very familiar to you, but remember, whoever reviews the grant is not familiar with your organization or your community for that matter. That's the last bullet point here. Write as though the reader knows nothing about your community, which is usually very, very true. So place names, street names, anything like that, don't use them. Just describe a locality, a geographic area, if the grant application asks for it. And don't say, oh yeah, we have a river XYZ running there. Yeah, well, so what? I mean, just kind of put it all into context and don't just say, oh, our site is located, like say at the intersection of Main Street and 3rd Street, and leave it at that. Because it's a waste of space, basically. So clear and concise. I think that's the main point here. Building a compelling case for your grant is very important, obviously, because you want the money that the agency that distributes those fundings has, and it's not always easy. It sounds easy, but it can be difficult. Let's put it that way. So you want to look, obviously, you want to know what the granting agency is all about. I mean, what types of grants do they provide, and how does it fit? The grant criteria, what are they looking for? So you really need to write towards the criteria. And usually grant applications or grant guidelines, it's pretty prescriptive. So really read every single word and respond to that. Agency mission and objectives are important. Human and environmental impact, that goes for the EPA grants. Keep all that in mind when you write. And then the focus of your grant application. I mean, why is it so important for you, for your community to get this grant? Why? How beneficial is it, and why? So that's what this what, why, how, and who comes in. And this is from usually the environmental education grants that EPA is. What is the problem? Why is that problem there? How will this grant help fix it? And who will benefit? So these things, that's what you want to get across in a big picture in your grant application. I mean, you're asking for money, right? So you need to kind of explain why do you need it and how will you use it? Follow the direction. Yeah. Understanding threshold versus scoring criteria. Some grants may not have threshold depending on the granting agency, but for example, the EPA Brownfields grants have threshold, and then they have the scoring criteria. If you don't pass threshold, that's it. I mean, they're not even gonna read the rest of your however many pages. So really make sure that you don't get flung out of the grant competition by not answering everything that's required within the threshold criteria. Most of that goes to your eligibility as a grantee. So be aware of that. The next bullet points, it kind of depends how you like to write. I mean, all of the grant criteria usually have different points associated with them. I mean, some have more points than others. So some people write the criteria first that have the high value points associated with them, and some just go through from 1, 2, 3, 4, basically from beginning to end on the criteria. What you might want to make sure of, if you jump around, you want to make sure that your grant application flows, because usually the way the guidelines are written, one thing leads to another and builds on each other. So just keep that in mind. Check against the grant-specific evaluation criteria. A lot of times, granting agencies will tell you how they will evaluate your answers. So really read that in addition to the specific question that's being asked in the grant, and answer accordingly. And if there is something in there that is asked that it doesn't apply to your community, to your project, don't just leave anything blank. I mean, really say, this doesn't apply to us because. If you leave it blank, that might give the impression that you just overlooked that, or you just didn't want to answer it. So that's not a good thing. I mean, if it doesn't apply to you, say it. And be realistic. Don't ask for the moon if that is not something that you can accomplish, right? With your proposal, with your work plan, with your timeline, with your budget, is all this realistic? Or are you asking for too much? Are you bolstering your application too much with things that you might not be able to accomplish in the timeline that the grant is running, usually like maybe 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever. Grant reviewers usually are very experienced in what, what communities want, need, ask, and what they can do and what can be accomplished within a certain time. And if you're asking for too much without having a very, very good reason to it that you actually lay out in the application, you may lose points. So really be as realistic as you can. If you have questions about some things, that if you can't accomplish it or not, I mean, certainly you're not the only one in your organization. Ask your colleagues. As it happens, sometimes you don't get the grant that you apply for, right? Go ahead, I would say definitely apply within the next grant cycle after you get your debrief. Most granting agencies provide debriefs as to why you lost the points that you lost, how you can improve. Do take advantage of that, but don't blindly reuse your old applications. As I said before, guidelines change, sometimes not very much, but they do change, and you don't want to be caught in that trap. I also would say if you use somebody else to write your application, make sure that person doesn't do the same thing or uses an application template from another community. I've seen that before. You're reading something for community X and all of a sudden they're talking about community Y. So just be aware of that. So make sure your proposal follows the current guidelines. So here's a list of what I think strong applications have in common. I mean, they have all a well-defined challenge and an issue. They are focused with clear objectives. They show community support. That's especially important for EPA grants. They have a diverse set of partners, including grassroots partners, if at all possible. And they convey the understanding of what does it take to make it all happen, right? I mean, they lay out the process. They bring across that, yes, if we get this money, this is what we're going to do. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. So that's where you want to end up. So I think the next few slides, I have a little bit about community engagement because that is so important, and not all communities, especially when they're new at this, understand necessarily what does it mean. So this is an image out of a publication here. The reference is there. When you read this table from the left to your right, basically the public engagement and the impact of it increases. So information is always good, right? I mean, you definitely want to inform your community about what you're doing and why you're doing. But where you really want to end up is at collaboration and empowering your residents, your community to participate in the process, because you never know what ideas and what potential partnerships are available in a community if you don't involve residents. So here are some community engagement tools. They are not, this is not all, obviously there's a lot more. And what I will say is that always you need to tailor to your community as to what tools you use to engage them. I mean, if you live in a community, you know best how to engage people. So since COVID, community engagement has become a little bit more virtual. So social media, QR codes, emails, blogs, web pages, sometimes Zoom meetings, and that's all fine and well, but really in-person meetings usually work best. And you may have to do multiples of those because not everybody who's interested can be available at the time that you set a meeting, like say, right? Some communities, newspapers still work well to convey, at least give an update and invite people to meetings. Local TV, radio, flyers, door hangers, anything will work. There is a resource here that I put out there. If you look at the slides, the actual slides that got posted, I mean, this is a hyperlink. You can click on that. It was from Groundworks USA. They put some remote engagement in the age of COVID. Obviously, it was tailored to that together, but that might give you some ideas what you can do in addition to the non-virtual. So sometimes it's good to have a mix. Sometimes it's good to do something really, really quick and cheap. Like the image that I put here was posted by a community in a park. They didn't know, they wanted some opinion as to what features would make the space better. So the question was, what activities would make you come out here during lunch? And there was a phone number provided that people could text to, and a lot of people did. It was quick, it was easy, and it was cheap. So just think also a little bit outside the box if you want to gather community input. Community engagement should be equitable. I mean, you want to ideally include all members of your community. So that means that your meeting venues should be ADA accessible. You don't want to have seniors having to truck up 10 flights of stairs to get to a meeting room. If you have hearing impaired people in your community and you know that they're coming, you want to accommodate that. Age. A lot of times nowadays, oh yeah, we'll disseminate through social media. Well, not everybody is on social media. There are people who don't even have a cell phone. Thinking seniors, I mean, there are 80-year-olds that are very engaged in their community, but a lot of times I'm thinking of my mom here. She has a cell phone, but no way on earth will she be on social media. So keep that in mind. Language, if there are language barriers, have translators. If there is poverty in your community, do not exclude those people, right? I mean, make sure they have the ability to come to the meeting, provide transportation if it's needed, provide childcare. I mean, basically do everything you can that you can include everybody into your community engagement efforts and get their input. Obviously, community engagement early and often. And again, I mean, do what works in your community and work within those. Work with those methods that have been, that worked before. Explain what you have done, what will you do, what input you're looking for. And I mean, community engagement, as I said before, it's a good way to establish partnerships. So on the partnership side, you want to form those grant and task-specific partnerships early. I mean, obviously grant-specific, yeah. I mean, you need to have partners that can bring some benefit to the grant, to the project outcome. But also there are different partners, right? Because you have different items, so to speak, different tasks in your partnership. So not one partner will be able to handle everything. So cast a wide net. Always keep the goals and tasks of your project in mind. Yeah, that goes without saying nearly. You may have some gaps as to what you need. So you need to identify those gaps and then go out and see if there is a partner that you can entice being part of this project that can fill this gap. Know the mission of potential partners. I mean, don't ask them for something that they will find outlandish because that's something that they don't do, right? Seek input and feedback from your partners. Don't just say, yeah, here we want you on this proposal. We may need a letter of support from you. And that's it. I mean, really, again, that goes to making time for review. Seek their input and feedback and give them a draft application because they may have some good feedback for you. And make sure your partners are aware of the entire project and not only their role in it. Again, that goes to them being able to provide more input and maybe more services. Support letters and letters of commitment. Some agencies ask for them, some don't. But basically, if these letters are required, and I'm thinking more of support letters here, they should provide an outline of the organization that writes it, what specific activities that organization will perform to support the project. And it should be consistent with what is contained in the proposal. Really do stay away from form letters. There is no, it's totally okay to send them like a template, but just make sure they work outside of that template a little bit. I mean, basically the template will just tell them what you're looking for, but they need to fill in all the blanks and write it according to what they can provide. Yeah, quantity is not a substitute for quality. I mean, just make sure that the letters are written such that they really strengthen your proposal. And then start early to secure the letters. I mean, we had it happen that somebody asked for a support letter and the application was due tomorrow. That usually doesn't go over well. I want to spend a little bit of time on budget requirements because that seems to be sometimes a little weak point. So obviously, and I said this before, realism is good, right? I mean, especially for the budget, a reviewer will know if what you're asking for is a realistic number or not. So if you need to put cost estimates in there, I mean, really go out and do get cost estimates for the tasks that you need to perform. If you need to have a contractor, contact some contractor and see what they charge, right? If you have time, obviously, the more you contact, the better idea you have. Realistic estimates for each task, realistic and implementable timeline. We already talked about that. Your budget needs to make sense, right? I mean, don't go high, don't go low, be realistic and present costs or unit costs wherever it's appropriate. For example, if you have travel in there, don't just leave it at that. I mean, you need to explain, well, how many people are going to travel? What's the purpose? And then break it down, itemize it like airfare, rental car, whatever. And the same for supplies. If there is a category for supplies, what do you need them for? So really correlate the budget items to the tasks and activities. So here are some project tasks. That's another thing that people sometimes have problem with. These are some examples here. So for example, project management and administration, that could be a task. Any type of planning, for example, community engagement, contractual, if you need contractors. So just make a list of what you need, and then group these list items into major tasks, because you probably don't want to have more than 4 or 5 tasks. Here's an example that's from a Brownfield grant. So you can see this is like the suggested blank in this case, budget task, budget task table. So they have task 1, task 2, which you obviously need to label yourself, and then they prescribe the categories here. So that's already there. So don't change those in a grant if a grant gives you this, a grant guidelines, an OFA. That doesn't mean that you need to have numbers, budget items, cost for every single grant. It could be that you are not going to travel. It could very well be you don't use equipment or supplies. So just leave that blank, actually not blank, put a 0 there. So use the grants tables that are in the budget. So here's some more project task examples for project management, like report preparation. Every grant asks for reports, either monthly, quarterly, what have you, definitely a final report. Internal progress meetings, you can lump that in there, contractor procurement, expense processing, if you're looking at an assessment or cleanup grant, or brownfields, like project meetings, obviously the contractor activities, community engagement, the planning of the events, the preparation of materials that you might need, the actual event, and any follow-up to the community engagement event if it's required. And then you usually have an other category where you might want to list other eligible programmatic expenses, for example, like travel, or you're going to a project-related conference. Yeah. So travel to the conference registration, and whatever else goes with that. So here's a budget table from an environmental justice collaborative problem-solving grant. So you can see how that is structured. It looks a little bit different, but you have the budget categories here: the personnel, fringes, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, construction, indirects, and then other. And then the description of what is under that category. And then you have the totals on the right. Do make sure that your totals add up. I've seen a lot of grant applications where people apparently cannot add. And that, as a reviewer, that raises a red flag, right? I mean, if you can't even add numbers, how will you execute the project? So be careful with that. Here's another budget example. This is for a cleanup grant application. This is a slide that I used. It was just here in September of this year from the EPA Brownfield Grant Guidelines webinar, the federal one. So it's a budget example for this particular grant type. But again, you can see the categories, you can see the tasks, and how it's structured. Measuring progress. I mean, that's what every grantor will be looking for, because they want to make sure that you spend their money in a timely and efficient fashion. So you need to have a plan and a mechanism to track what you're doing and measure and evaluate your progress. So the tools are usually, you can use a tracking software. A lot of communities have those already. Progress reporting to the agency. ACRES reporting, this is for EPA. So ACRES stands for Assessment, Cleanup, and Redevelopment Exchange System. So that's the EPA reporting system. Schedule team progress meetings. I mean, all of these are tools for you to keep track of your project, because the measuring progress is also for you, of course, for you to stay on track. Not that you only need to provide that to the granting agency. Another thing that I found reviewing grants, people confuse outputs and outcomes a lot. And it's usually in the EPA grant guidelines. I mean, that is explained, but a lot of people don't read the entire guidance. So outputs is something what you produce over the terms of the grant, basically your activities. And outcomes is the short or long-term result or results of your activities. So the impacts of your activities. So here are some examples, outputs versus outcomes. So outputs, for example, for an EPA assessment or cleanup grant, the number of sites that were assessed or cleaned up, the number of reports that you produced, the number of meetings you had to execute the grant, the numbers of loans and sub-grants you may have led, any type of documents you developed, like a cleanup or redevelopment plan or a final APCA for an EPA grant. And outcomes, again, that is the result of your project. Obviously, not immediate. I mean, it can be taking years to get to the outcomes. And usually you don't need to necessarily substantiate. So for example, the number of jobs created or retained. I mean, that's usually a guess. I mean, you don't know, but you can make an educated guess as to what would be happening there. Maybe your project will improve health in the community and it would reduce crime, or the number of housing units you create, or the acres of green space created. So those are the long-term or short-term outcomes, the impacts of your project. For environmental justice grants, the EPA environmental justice grants, this usually translates into what they call performance measure logic model. And that's actually, as you can see here, it's an appendix in the grant guidelines, in the request for application. This comes out of one of the EJCPS grants. So you can see inputs, outputs, outcomes, impacts, right? So you have the outputs there, what you produce or deliver, examples here, workshops, events, publications, resident involvement, short-term outcomes, knowledge, skills, attitude, motivation, awareness, then the intermediate ones, behaviors, practice changes, procedure change, and then the long-term ones, it changes in environment, social conditions, economic conditions, policies. So here's a completed model, logic model examples. I'm not going to go through everything, but you can see that in this case, short-term outcomes 6 to 12 months, intermediate outcomes 12 to 24 months, long-term outcomes 2+ years. And then obviously what, like the actual line items underneath. here. So that's what that looks like. Here's another example. This is from an environmental education grant. Again, you have the outcomes, the outputs, and the project activities and the work plan tasks. Now remember, for the environmental justice grants, the work plan tasks, that's basically the grant application. A timeline, it's important. Some grant applications require you to put a timeline in a graphic form, like here on this example here. But that's not always necessary. I mean, maybe you can just say, I have some milestones, right? Or we have some milestones. We do this and this by Q3 of year 2. Or maybe it's sufficient to just mention the years if it's a multi-year grant. So this is where you really want to look at the guidelines and see what the requirements are. But most grants will require some sort of timeline to be put with the tasks that you will perform over the granting period. So here's a work plan sample for an environmental justice grant. Again, I mean, for those types of grants, this is the application, and you can see very prescriptive here, but because this is Appendix 2, they tell you how they want to see this, what you need to put in there. Task, description of task, project staff, start and end dates. So it always varies by grant. For the work plans after award, so these are the EPA Brownfields grant, the work plan consists basically of a condensed version of your proposal, and you will negotiate that work plan after award with the EPA. So usually you have an introduction, short task and subtask descriptions, outputs, outcomes that all can be in table form, completion dates, budget, and then quality assurance. So it always depends what grant you're applying for as to what is needed there. So I'm going to have some more tidbits that really didn't fit under any big topic. So I just kind of put that together based on what I saw in applications. Sensitive populations. A lot of people who write grants have a problem with what is that? Although in some grant lines, it's actually explained in the grant guidelines. So sensitive population, children, elderly, minorities, women of childbearing age. I would add also here people living in poverty. So these are populations that are much more affected by certain environmental and social changes than other populations. Statistics. Misha already mentioned that. Use the latest statistics available. If there is nothing recent available and you need to use a 5-year-old number, say that. This is the most recent number available. Because if you don't, a reviewer might think, well, they were just too lazy to look, right? Go beyond the usual sources and do your research. Fish around. When I wrote grants, it was always, statistics was always my most time-consuming task to pull together because there are so many sources. But what you do want to do when you mention numbers in your application, reference them. Don't just put a number there. Tell the reviewer what year the number is from and what the source is. When you're looking at demographics, it might behoove you to look at city data, the community data versus census blocks. Depends on your project, right? But it might make a difference. So for example, in this table, if you look at low income, for the community as a whole, the value is 49%. They are the 79th percentile in the state. And if you look at the census block, it's 69%, and they are the 93rd percentile in the state. So it makes a difference. So again, you need to compare and fish out what is the most beneficial statistic. Sometimes that's possible to do for your project. Programmatic capability, yeah. I mean, EPA and all other granting agencies, they want to know that you're capable of handling the grant funds, right? So your organizational structure is important. It's important that you have a competent and efficient team throughout the granting period. I would also recommend that you put in your backup plan. Maybe your most important project officer leaves for during the granting period, or maybe he or she gets sick. I mean, make sure you mention that you have a backup and not everything comes to a screeching halt just because one person is not there anymore for whatever reason. Description of key staff, you really want to make sure that you bring across that they're experienced and they are qualified to do whatever it is they do for this grant. Backup plans mentioned already. Additional resources. This goes to the gaps, right? This is where your partners come in. Successful execution of other federal or non-federal grants that you have, basically documenting that, yes, your organization, your community can handle these funds successfully. You also, again, track and document of what you do. Be clear on deliverables, check your timeline, abide by federal procurement requirements if you need to hire contractors, and contact your project manager with questions, because they're there to help you through this grant, to make sure that your project, your grant is successful, and because it looks good for you and it looks good for the granting agency if this all has a very good outcome, right? So take advantage of that. Here are some sources for health impact data. A lot of grant applications look for those kind of statistics. So I'm just going to I listed those. So if you go in and look at the posted slides, these are all hyperlinks. Public health data, those are important too. Don't forget your local health departments. And sometimes they're very helpful, sometimes not so much, but usually if they don't have data, they might be able to tell you where you can find them. I'm thinking of blood lead levels here. Environmental data, EJScreen, and Anna Marie is going to talk about that next. CJS, that's another thing she will talk about, so you'll get more information on that. So final slide here. Again, follow the current guidelines, usually a no-brainer, but it has to be said. Be clear and concise, no typos. Read your application. Have somebody else read it. That person can be, I don't know, your significant other, a coworker, anybody. But if they understand what you want to bring across and why, then it's a good application. Typos, again, not so good. Spell check usually doesn't do a good enough job, I should say. Again, if I see an application that has a lot of typos in it, I'm thinking, okay, they were just not careful enough. They just rushed here. So it just kind of gives this negative connotation, right? Make sure your budget adds up. Check proposal sections against evaluation criteria. You really want to write towards the evaluation criteria. Make sure you cross all your T's and dot your I's. Any type of font requirements, page limitations, respond to all criteria and questions. If something doesn't apply to you, as I mentioned before, say it. Be careful with tables. A lot of people think tables are the greatest thing in the world, but if you have page limitations, that might not be so. Don't assume a reviewer knows your community or region. They usually don't. So really explain how, if it's important for the grant application, what is the geographic setting? What are the problems? What is the history here? Have your proposal reviewed. Already said that. Multiple times is usually good. So make time for that. That's where your timeline comes in, right? Yeah, this cannot be a last-minute effort. Start early. We are all procrastinators and we think everything should go fast and we can make it happen fast. But yeah, usually that doesn't pan out like that. Same thing when you finally submit your grant application via grants.gov. I've seen it that it actually happened. You know, the deadline is like midnight on a certain date, and like 20 minutes before midnight, the system crashed because everybody was trying to start uploading their applications at the last minute. You don't want to be in that boat. go to any type of events, like listen to grant related webinars that provide some guidance. If you need clarifications, call the agency. They can usually, during the open competition period, they cannot talk with you about your project, but if you have any clarifying questions that you need to ask for the guidelines, they can answer that. And for the Brownfields grants, I would suggest use the K-State TAB Easy tool. That is very helpful. There are hints and tips there. It's password protected, and it's all explained, and it's accessible for free, obviously, on the K-State TAB website. So good application is cohesive, it's concise, it's an easy read. I mean, I really don't like applications where I have to go back a page to make sure I understood what they are saying on the current page what they're conveying there. So just make sure it's flowing well, it's easy to read, it's understandable, not full of acronyms. It's a compelling story. That's what it needs to be, that engages the reviewer and makes him or her want to help the applicant by providing the requested funding. So that's not to say that you should tell a sob story, far from it. But I mean, you need to make your case. That's what it's all about, right? I mean, why should they give you this money? And for what? So here's my contact information. I put Jennifer's on here too, obviously. You can call us anytime to specifically for the Brownfields grants, but for other grant types too, I would think. If you have any questions, just holler. And that's it. That's all I have. And I hope I was in time. Are there any questions?
Sabina, let's see. I saw a question come in that we got a question about where successful grant applications are published. So I'm going to put in the chat box where the Brownfields, the ones that we have, where those are published. I don't know about where other successful grant applications are published.
Right, and that depends on the granting agency. I mean, sometimes if you're lucky, they publish them on their websites, but I would always call if you don't find anything and see what you can find out. I mean, if you don't ask, you don't get. I mean, that's my mantra.
Right. So I will, during the next presentation, I'll put that information, the link that I know, into the chat box for where to find at least successful Brownfields grant applications, so that y'all can have that. Like Sabina says, if you're looking for another type of proposal beyond that, reach out to the funding agency and see if they can share with you. Let's see here. Anything else? Hang on. Oh, FOIA works also, as Jennifer Morris pointed out. I always forget about that.
So do I.
Okay, so we actually have scheduled, if there's no other questions about what we've covered so far, we do have another quick 5-minute break scheduled real quick, and then we will come back and hear from Anna Marie about community need and data and EJScreen. So come back in 5 minutes, and we'll keep this afternoon going. All right, thanks. Okay, let's start regrouping, switching gears a little bit. Hope everybody had a nice little walk around your office, stood up, stretched your legs, all the things. We have one wonderful presentation left, and then we'll, do our final little wrap up, and then you are free to go about the rest of your afternoon. One thing real quick before I jump in, our K-State TAB, one of our K-State TAB people has sent a private chat to a few participants that only have their first name showing on the here in Zoom. So if you don't mind checking your chat and looking to see if you're one of the people that received a direct message from her, and responding to her with what your last name is, so that we can make sure that you get appropriate credit for being at the event today, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much. All right. So Ana Marie Romero is here with us this afternoon. She's with EPA Region 7, and she is going to talk about how to describe your community and the needs of your community through data, and then she'll do a screening or a demonstration of the EJScreen tool. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ana Marie, and we'll get things moving.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ana Marie Romero, and I am the EJScreen coordinator for EPA Region 7. And right now I am in the middle of sharing my slides. And so Jennifer, you just please let me know if you see them right now.
See that? Yeah, here we go. Here they come. Yep.
Okay.
There we go. Looks good.
So thank you so much. So I've been teaching on EJScreen since 2018. This is a public web tool that's open to everyone to use, and it's a great tool that we use. The most recent update just happened like a week ago. We do now have EJScreen 2.2. It was down for several days. 2 days more than anticipated, but there was a lot more updates to it this time. And so this training came at a perfect timing. I know this is the last training of the day, so I'll promise I'll be quick and to the point and get you guys out of here. So thank you for being patient with me. So like I said, EJScreen is a EPA's web-based GIS tool for nationally consistent EJ screening and mapping. And I'll talk a little bit more later on how it works and how the EJScreen identifies communities with potential environmental concerns. So this tool combines environmental data and socioeconomic data to highlight areas where vulnerable populations may be disproportionately impacted by pollution. So you'll see that environmental data comes from EPA only. The socioeconomic data comes from the census. And so we do that because we want to make sure that we have nationally consistent data that you're able to compare different areas. Some of the key features about this tool that makes it unique is that it's annually updated. And so when we say annually update, the tool will annually update when it can, but however, environmental data does not update annually. So just be mindful of that. There's some data that, like, for example, some air quality data will update every couple years. And so when EJScreen does its annual update, it captures that. We also updated the census data. So the current one, I believe, is 2019 American Community Survey. We also want to make sure we have the highest resolution data available, and you can also download this data. So like I mentioned before, we just had our 2.2 updates. It took a little while than expected to load, and so the whole EJScreen tool was down. But what's included in these updates, we updated the environmental data sets. Now we have the American Community Surveys from 2017 to 2021. Previously, it was 2019. We have a new environmental indicator, and it's called the toxic release to air. And I'll show you in the tool where you can go to glossary on the tool to show, to give you more information about each of the environmental indicators. And it gives a breakdown of what it is, where that information comes from. And there's a link if you want to go to that site. Same with the census data. When we talk about poverty level, you can go to the glossary and see what's the definition of the poverty. There's a different, when it comes to ozone, we switched from using the summer seasonal average to the annual average to the top 10 daily maximum 8-year air concentration. And then what you also will see is the new EJScreen community report. The data and features are now in one report. So the reports have evolved over time, and why it's evolving over time is we're actually taking advice, and we're actually taking comments and feedback from those who use it the most. They're like, hey, we want to see this, and that's where we're getting a lot of updates from. So we're not just putting random updates out there. We're taking people's feedback, we're taking community and organizations and academia, we're taking their feedback, and we're implementing those into actions. And so that's why you see updates every time we do a training similar to this. New data sets that you will see is persons with disabilities, cancer, lack of health insurance, housing burden, transportation access, facility compliance status, and EPA, which is the new one, EPA IRA disadvantaged communities, and we'll get more into this later. So what is an EJ index, and how do we what does that mean? So what we do to create the EJ index, what we do is we take environmental data and we combine it with demographic data. We put it into a formula and it spits out the EJ index. So we have 13 EJ index. We do have a supplemental index, and a supplemental index does take out the people of color, and that is towards the bottom of the report. But we take the environmental, which is 13 indicators, and the socioeconomic, which only includes people of color and low income, and we combine that with the environmental that spits out EJ index. It does not include the health, climate, or critical gaps, but those are just supplemental indexes for y'all. Another thing, supplemental indexes combines additional socioeconomic data sets and includes health as well. So that formula is a little different than the EJ index formula. So again, we're talking about two different formulas. We have the EJ index formula, and then we have the supplemental index formula. The major difference, again, just to stress, is that the supplemental index combines additional data and takes out the people of color. So this is what our report looks like. It's a standard report that has been rebranded. It's 4 pages of data and features in one new report. Some of the features include a community socioeconomic breakdown by ACE and race and age, language spoken at home, and limited English speaking breakdown as well. It also includes EJ and supplemental indexes. Again, going back to that formula, you'll have both. And then it will have raw data, sites reporting to EPA, some community features, health, climate, and critical services. And then we also rebranded the standard report for, so what you'll see here, we had a table before, and now we have a bar graph. Again, I think this is a repeat slide, I apologize, but I wanted to point that out too. Okay, so here is the raw data that you will see. So oftentimes when you pull a report and you see an EJ index, it's really helpful to go to the second page and look at the raw data. So the threshold that we use to identify a community with environmental justice concern is looking at the EJScreen, looking for in the 80th percentile, right? But sometimes, since because of our geographic location, and we're mostly rural in Region 7, we don't always hit that 80th percentile. So I encourage you all to look at the raw data. In particular, look at the low income population, and if it's well above the state and the country's average, then we will still ding that if it includes one pollution or source that's above that 80th percentile. So if you don't see it in the EJScreen EJ index, please look at the raw data. Also, because we feature the new the other data, the other supplemental EJ index, If you don't have anything in the 80th percentile in the EJ index, I encourage you all to look at the other supplemental index to see if there's anything in that 80th percentile that focuses on more on other indicators. It includes low income and some other things as well. So when it comes to working on applications for grant writing, this is a great tool to identify, if you haven't already, to identify your community need, that section there that you have to talk about, hey, what are the boundaries? This is a great tool if you don't have your target area to use to identify your target area. And that map will show you the boundaries. And so when you are addressing that community need and it's asking for boundaries, you have that information in this tool, and you can use the report to say, hey, this community is impacted by looking at the selected variables for pollution and sources. You can say this is impacted by lead or air toxics. And then when it comes to explaining what the socioeconomic impacts are for that community, you can say, hey, majority is low income or people of color. And you can see that right in this report. So here's some additional information that's included that's useful when it comes to describing your community need. There is health indicators, climate indicators, and those critical service gaps all are useful to identifying those vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. And so I encourage you all to read the report all the way through, and it's a great extra resource for you to use when you're describing your community need and your target areas. So I know this was a short EJScreen presentation. I just wanted to give a bird's eye high level overview of the tool itself. We do have an EJScreen website that has additional resources such as trainings, recordings, office hours that headquarters puts on. We also have, it tells you how to read the report and the glossary as well. If you're once you go in the tool and you say, hey, what does this mean? You can go into the glossary and it gives you information on what that indicator means. So a couple other resources is you're more than welcome to download the EJScreen data. And in some cases, you can upload your data into EJScreen as well. We also have an EJScreen technical document. However, it's a long document, but what's useful I found is the glossary. We also have EJScreen map services and EJScreen API. So really we have additional resources on the website. And I encourage you all to go to the office hours. This one, I don't know. I apologize. This office hours on October 18th has already passed. And however, I can get that information out to you on the next office hours. And it is available to the public. So the other thing I wanted to touch on real quick is the CJES tool. Everyone's heard about the CJES tool. It came from the Executive Order 14008 on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. And this is from President Biden. Directed the Council of Council on Environmental Quality. So this is not an EPA tool, but there are some similarities. And this tool was created by the White House. And so one difference that you will see between EJScreen and CJES is that they do not use the people of color as an indicator for their socioeconomic demographics. They've also included other socioeconomic factors into that. They also use, they don't use the word environmental or EJ community. So we want to be careful not to call a community an EJ community. We often let them self-identify. How we do that is talking with our community partners who have boots on the ground in that community, who would, give us feedback on, what community members say. But the CJS tool, it helps federal agencies identify disadvantaged communities. So they've been historically marginalized and underserved and overburdened by pollution. So this tool provides important information for the Justice 40 initiative. So that's one big difference, is those agencies that are part of the Justice 40 initiative will use the CJS tool as opposed to EJScreen. So, and if those that don't know the Justice 40 initiative, it's where the White House directed at least 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments go towards those communities. So what are some of the CJS similarities and key differences? Well, CJS is largely based on the same data sets featured in EJScreen, such as the socioeconomic, environmental, climate, and health indicators. That environmental indicators that are found in CJS, that is EPA data. So there's 10 environmental and climate data sets featured as criteria in CJS that are pulled directly from EJScreen. And there are some overlaps in terms of geographies highlighted by both tools. Some key differences: EJScreen features block group level refinement, while CJS is track level. And that's one thing that I like about EJScreen, is that when it comes to identifying your target area, you can go down to a block group level. CJS only provides a track level data and does not provide user-driven analytical capacity. So no user-defined areas. That's one thing I like about EJScreen, is that if you are trying to identify communities along a creek, then you can use a tool that outlines that creek and pulls information from communities from around that creek. And then CJS is a designation tool for quote unquote disadvantaged community, while EJScreen does not label communities at all. EJScreen is more, it gives you a bird's eye view of a community. It's a starting point. So it's a starting point to identify where you should go meet your partners first, or what community you should go into first and do boots on the ground research. So we often tell everyone to don't rely on EJScreen or CJS as your only tool. Please use other supplemental information. Contact your local partners that you have to talk to, just to get more of a boots on the ground information on, is what you're seeing on EJScreen, is it what's going on, and just confirming what you're seeing with boots on the ground research. And a great way to do that is by talking to local churches and in addition to community organizations. So on July 12th, 2023, there was a memo defining low income and or disadvantaged communities. And this is regarding the Inflation Reduction Act programs. This doesn't really apply to this situation, but I just wanted you all to be aware of why you're all of a sudden hearing disadvantaged communities or overburdened, as opposed to EJ communities or communities with environmental justice concerns. So that's where that language is coming from. So I want to go into a little bit of disadvantaged communities. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's just something to be mindful of. It's a term that is used now, sometimes in lieu of communities with EJ concern. So the definition includes all of the following: any census tract that is included as disadvantaged in the CJS tool, any census block that is at or above the 90th percentile for any EJScreen supplemental index when compared to the nation and state. So please be mindful that in here they're using 90th, and here at EPA Region 7, we're using 80th. However, that's not the law of the land. That's just a starting point that, you know, we are using. So if you're coming across a community and it's in the 70th percentile, please don't say, okay, well, it's not a community with environmental justice concern. It's not overburdened. That's when you go take a look at those, the breakdown of that information and look to see, well, you know, what's high? Is it low income? Is it something else? So if you know the 80th percentile, the 90th percentile, it's not the law of the land. So I encourage you again, if you see high numbers, that you still consider that and do additional research on that community. There is a disadvantaged community layer availability in the EJScreen itself. It's under the tab called Places, and then you go all the way to the bottom, and then it's the Justice 40 IRA indicator. So that's just for your awareness. That's the new 2022 change or 2023 change. So now I'm going to stop now, and while I'm changing over to EJScreen, I'll be more than happy to take any questions as I'm transitioning. The screen in about 5 minutes, and then let you all go. So this is the EJScreen tool. On the left side, you will see your tool belt. This is your tool belt, where you can add layers. So the first page of that you see of the tab, you're adding layers. So you can add environmental justice index layers. You can add supplemental index layers. You can go in and add pollution and sources. It's whatever you're looking for. So you can add layers. You can also add multiple layers. It may get a little busy, so just be careful. But what I like to do, if you have not already identified your target area, how you can identify your target area is by simply just going in here and clicking socioeconomics. And what I like to do is apply the low income layer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it says, it's not reachable. So there we go. So what you'll see here is the low income layer. And the other tools, I would like to, oftentimes I compare it to the state, because if you compare, there's not a big difference, but when you're comparing within the state, it makes the information just a little bit more relevant. Your next tab will be Places. And so this is other additional layers, like you can put regulated facilities. If you're looking at a certain community, you want to see, okay, I'm going to click here and let's see what's in this area. So as you can see, there are water discharges, and these entities have to report to EPA. So you can say, hey, this community is also impacted by wastewater discharges. And we also have air pollution, brownfields, and hazardous waste. Another layer I like to use is schools. So when we talk about community need, if there are schools close to facilities that are polluting, that often leads, I would suggest that you look at their health. What kind of negative health impacts are you seeing within that community in relation, and how far is that polluting facility, how far is it, or how close to it is to that school? So we have, as you can see here, we have 3 schools within a 1 mile radius, and we have 1, 2, 3 discharging facilities that have to report to EPA. And then as you, so that's this layer. The next one is reports. So if you don't have an address, if you're just kind of like just looking at a community, you can drop a pin or you can draw an area. When you're drawing an area, you're drawing a polygon. And what that does is it pulls the information data within that polygon, which is great for, because we know not every site or not every facility or every community are in these straight blocks. And so drawing a polygon is really useful. I had mentioned before, you can draw a path or along a creek and then create a boundary. And then it will pull, the tool itself will pull the data from that boundary. Excuse me. You can also select a tract, or you can select city, county, or multiple areas. And if you do select multiple areas, I believe it's multiple block groups or multiple tracts. The next one is your tools. So you can save the session without having to create a login, which is great because that's one less password we have to worry about. When you open up on your same computer, it will save that session. Measuring is a great tool to measure the distance between a facility and, let's say, a childcare center or a school. You can add shape files. If you have additional data you want to upload, you can do that. We have a geo platform. So if you're looking for other, I use a geo platform when I was looking at redlining communities. We do have a map in there of Kansas City. You can add a map service, and what that is just a URL from another mapping service that you can plug in and create an additional layer. And if you hit print, you can print the map as it is. It will not print the report. So to print the report, you'll want to just click on your address or your site. When you name the report, it's just going to be what shows up on the report. 1 mile buffer. When I'm in an urban setting, I can do a 0.5 mile buffer. That makes sense. But if I'm in a rural area, I want to expand my buffer wider because there's less density of population, or if you we know that pollution doesn't travel. It doesn't stay in just one area, it travels. So if you're looking at pollution in the air, you want a wider buffer. If you're looking at maybe a brownfield, you'll want to look at a much smaller buffer. So I'm going to do 1 mile, and I am almost done because I'll let you know how to read the map. You can scroll out to see, it's doing the opposite, to see what it's all capturing. So I'm just going to scroll out, and you can see there. And then I'm going to run the report, if it will let me. And then you'll click Explore Reports. Will not give you the printable one. The EJScreen PDF that's the normal reports that you guys will see. That's helpful when it comes to downloading and printing. It does take a couple seconds to collect all that information, put it in the formula, spit it out in a template. And so please be patient. It does take a minute or two. So as you can see here is your printable report. The first page will show you the map, but it's not wanting to come up right now because I'm having some connection issues. But you'll see here information regarding your community. So this is really great information when it comes to your community need and really talking about your target area in detail. Gives you a breakdown by race, and here's that language is spoken. The last reports had you had to go to the American Community Survey, which was another link to get this, but I love how it's on this report now. So that's a big difference. So you can see half the population is non-English speaking. 38 is Spanish, and the rest is Vietnamese. So there's a breakdown, and this is really good for community outreach and engagement. So if you know you have a community with high speaking Spanish population, you'll want to make sure that in your community need that, or when you're writing your application, that you make sure you include those additional resources that you'll have to do to reach out to this population. So that may mean, hey, I'm going to have to, this outreach material has to be in Spanish. When we have our community meetings, we'll have someone, an interpreter there, and we'll have activities in both English and Spanish. So it's great to have this on this report. Supplemental, again, as you can see, everything is in the 90s. This is just that additional information, and it tells you, excuse me, this is the EJ index. It tells you what it's combining, which is low income and people of color. And then below, you'll have the supplemental, and it tells you what it's combining. So it's combining low income with logistically isolated, percent with less than high school education, percent unemployed, and low life expectancy. And that's how you get the supplemental index. Keep further, and down below, this is that raw information that I had encouraged you all to look at to see in detail what this is. Now, the second column that says value, that means nothing to us unless you're a scientist. So we're really looking at the state average percentile in state, and anything above that 70th or 80th or 90th percentile. Same with socioeconomic. So a lot of great information here. It's 3:35, and so please let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out. If you have any, if you want to do a one-on-one or if you need assistance in reading the report, I'm more than happy to help you. So again, thank you for having me on. I know that was a lot of information, so feel free to send me questions as well. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Anna Marie. Before we wrap things up, anybody have any quick questions for Anna Marie before she leaves us today? We'll pause just a minute again while we're waiting. So at this point, any questions about anything, EJScreen, anything else that Anna Marie presented, anything Sabina presented, anything Maisha presented, any general questions that you have that we haven't already gotten to in the chat, this is a great time to ask those questions. The link to the evaluation, I'm going to ask Dana to put that in the chat one more time. Jacob, you're distracting me with your silly questions there. Sorry, the Brownfields coordinator for Missouri DNR just asked, what is a brownfield? And it was a huge distraction to me just now. So please, the post evaluation, you can click on the link in the chat box, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. Again, these are, as I mentioned, these are really, really helpful to us because they do help us continue to design programming that is hopefully very, very beneficial to those of you that are attending. How do you access EJScreen? I think that already got put in the chat. I gotta scroll, but if someone, Monica, I think you put that in there. Oh no, you put the office hours. Let's see if someone else can. Here we go. Sabina posted the link to EJScreen into the chat so that you should all be able to get at it. And what else? I hope you are planning to join us for the other 2 sessions in this series. The next one is happening next Thursday, November 2nd, same time, 1 o'clock. During that session, we'll talk about some of the EPA grant opportunities that are currently available from different departments, and we'll hear from some actual grantees on their experience applying for these grants and getting awarded these grants and what that was like for them. And then on the third one is, what is that date? November 9th. The Thursday after next, same time, 1 o'clock. And during that one, we'll hear from HUD, and we will hear from the Brownfields Job Training Grant, and we will hear from what's the other one? Sabina, help me out. We have 3 types of grants we're going to hear about.
USDA.
Thank you, USDA. Brain blah. And then we will also be hearing from grantees during that session too, talking about their experiences applying for and receiving those particular grant opportunities. So we really do hope that you can come back and join us. If you registered for this particular event, you are registered for all of these events, whether you can attend or not. So you should already have the contact information. And if there is nothing else, I don't want to rush everybody away, but I don't want to force everybody to stay here listening to me babble. However, if you do not want to stick around, this is it. We can part ways here, and we will see you next week or the week after. And we really appreciate you joining us today.